We hear the forecast constantly. The job market you're walking into, or, well, already navigating, is defined by relentless innovation.
Hmm.
We are fully in the innovation age, where employment, it's not just about having information, it's about generating and utilizing new ideas. Organizations are desperate for people who can ingeniously apply and create knowledge.
It's a huge educational shift. I
Yeah.
mean, if we want future generations to stay competitive in this
Hmm.
this landscape that's just evolving so quickly, we have to equip them with more than just content mastery.
Right.
We have to teach them to think unconventionally and maybe even more importantly, to withstand the pressure when that unconventional thinking, well, when it fails the first time.
And that challenge is precisely what's driving our deep dive today. We're looking into one of the most proactive solutions education has come up with, project-based learning, or PBL,
Mhm.
specifically within STEM science, technology, engineering, and math, and this really vital expansion to STEAM, which brings in the arts.
And we've gathered a stack of sources detailing these approaches. Our goal for you is pretty clear: to unpack the hard empirical evidence, to show exactly how PBL and that crucial A in STEAM can dramatically foster two essential 21st century skills.
Okay, so what are they?
Those skills are creativity, the capacity to conceive original and beneficial concepts, and resilience, particularly the ability to handle the inevitable setbacks and failures that just come with innovation.
Okay, let's unpack that foundation first. Project-based learning. I feel like we need to go beyond the buzzword here and really clarify what an effective PBL environment looks like.
At its core, PBL is an instructional approach where students collaborate. They address these complex real-world problems and actively construct their own knowledge rather than just passively receiving it.
So it's trying to mirror the real world.
It deliberately mirrors the collaborative and iterative problem-solving that happens in actual professional settings, especially in STEM professions.
It's highly student-centered, which I imagine means the teacher's role has to fundamentally change.
Oh, completely. They move from being, the source of all information to being a facilitator. They're the expert guide who poses critical questions and manages resources, but they let the students drive the inquiry process.
So the approach is interdisciplinary, collaborative.
Exactly. Inquiry-based and often technology-driven. And this integration is why science, technology, engineering, and math lend themselves so naturally to this approach. They're designed to solve problems using multiple tools at the same time.
But the big movement right now, the one that's generating the most excitement, is this shift from STEM to STEAM. So when STEM education got so widely adopted, why did educators feel this acute need to bring in the arts, the A?
Well, the critique of STEM alone, while it provides essential technical benefits, is that it often misses critical components for the modern economy.
Like what?
Engineering and science, they require more than just technical precision. They demand aesthetics, design thinking, critique, pure ingenuity. And STEM alone, the critics argue, doesn't always provide the framework for fostering that kind of creative application.
So the A isn't just about aesthetics or making a poster pretty. It's fundamentally about changing how students approach the problem itself.
Precisely. STEAM uses all five areas, S, T, E, A, and M, as these powerful access points for guiding student inquiry, dialogue, and critical thinking.
Okay.
And the benefit is, when you integrate arts practices and design principles, you expand the student's capacity for critical inquiry and innovation. They connect scientific principles with, say, the standards of visual communication or the rigorous processes of art critique.
So there's this common critique of STEAM, right? That it just means slapping some glitter on a robot or, adding paint, tape, and glue to what is basically a pure engineering project. How does the research define the best practice to actually counter that?
That is such a crucial distinction. If you want a true STEAM experience, the one that yields the cognitive benefits we're about to get into, the best practice demands the intentional connection of two or more standards from those five areas.
Okay, two or more.
And here's the key part. Those standards have to be taught and assessed in and through each other.
So if a student is building a bridge in an engineering class, it's not enough to ask them to just decorate it. No. To hit a true STEAM standard, they might need to use a standard from the arts-like perspective drawing or architectural rendering to model the structural integrity and aesthetic flow. And then their understanding of both the engineering and the art standard must be assessed together.
That's the mechanism. It removes limitations, it introduces ethical and aesthetic considerations, and it fosters that sense of wonder, critique, and innovation. If you don't connect and assess the integrity of the artistic content, you just have STEM dressed up. You don't have integrated STEAM.
Okay, now that we understand the mechanism, let's shift to the measurable impact. We know creativity is vital. It's the capacity to conceive original, beneficial concepts, and the research confirms it enhances critical thinking, conceptual understanding.
And what's really crucial to remember, as the sources point out, is that creativity is not some immutable, innate trait you're just born with.
Right.
It's a cognitive phenomenon that can be imparted and refined.
And the research confirms that STEM project-based learning is an incredibly potent way to cultivate that skill.
Absolutely. A recent meta-analysis looked at the impact of STEM PBL on creativity across both K-12 and college students. The researchers analyzed 8 independent studies, which gave them 13 different effect sizes, so we get a really robust view of the aggregated impact.
Okay, let's talk numbers, because this is where it gets really interesting. What did the data tell us about the efficacy of this approach?
The results showed a statistically significant and, well, substantial overall effect size of 3.888.
Wait, 3 point?
3.888 with a very tight 95% confidence interval. This just overwhelmingly indicates a favorable and powerful impact of STEM PBL on students' creative abilities.
I have to pause here because that number is staggering in educational research. I mean, for listeners who follow this stuff, an effect size of D0.4 is usually considered highly effective. D0.8 is often called a large effect, like one-on-one tutoring.
Right.
A 3.888 effect size is not just large, it's completely off the charts. It means the average student in a STEM PBL class performed nearly 4 standard deviations better creatively than students in a conventional classroom.
That magnitude just underscores the transformative power of the approach. But we need to understand the mechanism, right? Why is PBL so uniquely effective for creativity?
It's not magic, it has to be in the design.
It is entirely in the structure. The PBL classroom fosters creativity because it's student-centered, it's inquiry-based. Key strategies involve fostering curiosity, encouraging students to make genuine discoveries, pose and generate their own questions, and then rigorously test their findings to explore novel solutions.
The collaboration piece is key.
Collaboration is critical. When students work together, they amalgamate their diverse knowledge, their efforts, their understanding, which forces meaningful creative processes that just couldn't happen in isolation.
And looking at the sheer diversity of the projects covered in this meta-analysis, this isn't just a theoretical boost, it's tangible innovation. The programs cover these complex technical topics, everything from designing free energy aquariums and steamships to energy modeling, coding, even combating infectious diseases.
It shows that creativity isn't a soft skill. It's the engine for technical solutions. But you can't talk about innovation and problem solving without addressing the inevitable reality of failure.
Which brings us directly to our second core skill, resilience. And this is often a huge psychological barrier for students, especially the high-achieving ones. They are trained to value success, and they view failure as a personal weakness, something associated with guilt, shame, and, quitting.
And this is where the inherent structure of project-based learning becomes so valuable. The iterative design process, the constant sketching, modeling, prototyping, testing, it's naturally full of these small, low-stakes failures.
So the goal is to leverage those.
The goal of the instruction is to leverage those iterative moments as learning opportunities. The popular design firm motto, fail often to succeed sooner.
So how did the researchers take this natural failure environment and turn it into intentional instruction to improve resilience?
Well, one study looked at specific interventions in an introductory undergraduate design course, specifically to normalize failure. They recognized the fear wasn't really tied to the project, it was tied to the culture.
So how did they start chipping away at that culture?
They started with failure seminars. Guest speakers, including successful faculty, admissions officers, they shared these raw stories of their own academic and professional failures.
Like what kind of things?
Things like being berated as an undergraduate or actually failing a college course. They just normalized vulnerability.
And what was the feedback from students on those seminars?
Overwhelmingly positive. Students particularly appreciated the seminars that involved higher stakes failure because it felt more relevant to their own high-pressure lives. They valued the connection they could make, especially relating to imposter syndrome or managing expectations from parents or the institution.
Sharing that level of vulnerability, that must have been profoundly impactful for students dealing with self-doubt. What else did they do to kind of force a codified process of reflection on those smaller failures?
They implemented a prototype logger. This was an online form students had to complete to reflect on each prototype they created. They weren't just describing what they made. They were describing what went wrong and what specific lesson was learned from that iteration.
A mandated failure analysis? Did they engage with that level of structural reflection?
They did, and the impact was measurable. 74% of students reported that this intentional, repetitive reflection made them significantly more comfortable with the concept of failure as just part of the process.
Wow.
It's the value of codifying the learning.
I find that incredibly compelling. What was the third intervention, the more visual one?
The third was the Mistake Museum. This was a virtual gallery where students displayed artifacts of failure from their projects, and they put reflective captions explaining what happened. The explicit goal was to visually display failure as a necessary, even celebrated part of design.
And did that work?
58% of students reported this specific intervention made them more comfortable with failure.
So the overall result of these interventions was a definite cultural shift. But did the students suddenly see themselves as these failure-embracing risk-takers?
That's where the study revealed a fascinating nuance. The intervention successfully changed the external perception. Student perception of the openness to failure within the class, the field of design, and their major all changed significantly. They saw the environment as safer.
But there's a but.
But the program did not significantly change their pre-existing perceptions of their own personal openness to failure, nor their perception of the university's openness to failure at large.
So you can make the classroom feel safer, but those deeper personal beliefs and perceptions of the huge institution, those are much more resistant to change.
They're more immutable perceptions. And that resistance leads us to dive even deeper into the psychological reality of resilience. A separate study focused on secondary school students who encountered significant difficulty in a STEM lesson, and it examined their emotional processes.
Okay.
The researchers used a framework called the Ecological Systems Model of Resilience, which breaks it down into 3 core capabilities.
Let's clarify those 3 so we know what was being measured.
The 3 are, first, recovery, which is the ability to quickly and easily bounce back from a setback. Second is ecological capacity, which means staying focused on your goals despite challenges. And third is adaptive capacity, the ability to naturally adjust your thinking and strategies.
So what was the critical emotional link they found when they analyzed the students' written commentary?
They found a definitive connection between the lack of resilience and negative emotional processes. Specifically, a lower ability in the recovery capacity, that ability to bounce back quickly, was significantly related to struggling students.
And how did that show up?
When comparing high and low resilient students, they found the low resilient students used significantly more anger words in their commentaries.
Anger. So anger is the active emotional process that distinguishes those who struggle to return to stability. That's a medium effect size difference, which means this emotional regulation is key to surviving difficulty in STEM. And I assume the source material helps us identify where that anger comes from.
Absolutely. The anger stemmed from 2 main categories. First, interpersonal sources. This often reflected a perceived lack of teacher support.
So students wrote things like,
the teacher doesn't help, or showed deep anxiety like, Miss is going to have a go at me if I ask for help. This perceived judgment or absence of support just inhibited their recovery.
and we should probably pause on the demographics here because the low resilient group was shown to have significantly more female students. This direct link between perceived lack of teacher support, anxiety about asking for help, and anger. It ties right back into the existing literature on the STEM gender gap.
It connects directly. In environments perceived as unsupportive, these interpersonal anxieties just compound the difficulty. They drive the emotional barrier that specifically inhibits recovery.
And the second source?
The second was interpersonal sources linked to internal self-defeating rumination.
Rumination, so the looping negative thoughts.
Exactly. Thoughts like, I am so stupid, why do I even try? I will never get it right.
Yeah.
Which then leads to anger, frustration, and this desire to disengage by seeking distraction, like doodling or daydreaming. These internal thought processes actively block the ability to quickly return to a stable state and re-engage.
So if schools want to intentionally build that recovery capacity and maybe address some of the subtle biases that compound emotional difficulty in technical subjects, they have to address these emotional processes head on.
Precisely. The implication for educators is clear. The focus has to shift toward explicitly teaching emotion regulation strategies, like encouraging relaxation, exploration, optimistic thinking, and, crucially, nurturing classroom environments where teacher support isn't just offered, but is actively evident, accepted, and effective. That psychological safety is foundational.
This deep dive has shown the immense documented power of this instructional approach. STEM, PBL, and STEAM are proven to deliver these large, statistically significant increases in creativity. I mean, that effect size of 3.888.
Hmm.
That is proof that creativity is a skill you can teach and amplify.
And on the flip side, we saw that resilience, specifically the capacity to recover from difficulty, is key to sustained success in technical fields. Simple structural interventions like reflection logs, visual museums of failure, and sharing stories of failure can profoundly shift student perceptions about the safety of their environment.
And those interventions aren't just for college kids. The successful professionals who participated in those failure seminars used those reflective practices to reframe their own accomplishments and actively overcome feelings of imposter syndrome, long into their careers.
Which leaves us with a provocative final thought for you, the listener. We have seen that the greatest cognitive shift happens when low-stakes failure is made explicit, analyzed, and codified, just like with the students and that prototype logger.
So consider this. How could you, in your professional life or your learning journey right now, whether you're tackling a new skill, managing a challenging project, or even recovering from a small organizational misstep, how could you integrate a personal mistake museum or a prototype logger practice?
How can you move past simply having a setback and instead explicitly structure a process to analyze what went wrong, turning those low-stakes failures into codified learning outcomes that actively build your capacity to bounce back?